It's 6 o'clock. Let's call the meeting to order and we'll start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would we please do the roll call?
Councilmember Polito,
Here.
Councilmember Hawkins,
Here.
Councilmember Lewis,
Here.
Vice Mayor Widmer,
Here.
and Mayor DeGolia.
I'm here. Okay, the first item on the agenda is there are two presentations. One is from the Park and Recreation Committee. Alex?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So I'm the incoming chair.
Trustee outgoing
He will. But he may be the repeating. Yeah.
Okay, I'm good now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Council. So we've had a great year, the last fiscal year. Thank you to our liaison, Rick, and also our Sally, if she's somewhere. So maybe she's online. Sally Benz, our staff liaison. If I could go to the next slide. We've done quite a lot and a lot's happened in the park in the last fiscal year. The two big policies that we've updated are the pricing policy with the venues and also with the council's help and input. You know, we've completed that this year, as well as the park donation policy too. So those were kind of the two big policy documents that we've completed. Within the park itself, we've done a lot of new things. One is the tree walk that was done by some volunteers and Sally's help, as well as the park lighting project. All the lights were replaced, as well as the parking lot turnaround so that people have a way to turn around in the park now when they reach the end of it, the parking lot. We're taking on a new vendor in Brightview for landscaping. So we're very excited as a committee to work with Brightview. So that's going to be a big change. And we've overlaid 3 of the 6 tennis courts. So about half of them are done and we plan to do the next 3 or 2 of them this coming fiscal year and updating the clay courts to improve that. And then also we've done a bit on off-leash dog education and enforcement with the police chief's help. So those were all the changes in the last fiscal year. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 2023, we're looking at 3 main projects that the Park and Rec Committee has decided on. One is a circulation plan. We're very excited to get that moving. So we want to get the plans finished so that they can be put out the bid and start implementing it. So that's one of the big things we're working on. Second major thing is probably all have heard the national and local interest in pickleball. And we've also heard from residents that they're interested in doing some type of pickleball in the park. So we're planning a trial and thinking of how we're going to execute that in this upcoming fiscal year. And then with an idea of, you know, if it's successful, we'll think about what we can do for permanent, but we're not sure if that will come in this fiscal year, but at least the trial we're planning for this fiscal year. And also, since Brightview is new, we want to bring them on, make sure that things are, as we work with them, make sure the park landscape is taken care of, especially the courtyard area where we have a lot of plantings. So we want to work with that. So those are our main focus. And just a quick update on park cost recovery. I covered this last year, but just to give you guys an update of new numbers. So hit the space bar. When we were pre-COVID in fiscal year 2019, we had a very great cost recovery of almost 2/3%, which is very, very high for any park. So that's just a testament to, you know, staff and council and everyone kind of making sure we keep the costs low and also make sure we bring in some decent revenue to run the park. It has declined with every successive year of COVID until this recent year in which we're doing some partial recovery. So we're a little bit back to 32% in terms of cost recovery. Next, can you hit the space bar again? This compared to national numbers, you can see that in non-COVID years, it was exceptional what Holbrook Palmer Park is doing. But we've declined a bit, but that's okay. I think because mostly the revenue from rentals and things like that have significantly declined with COVID, and our park relies heavily on that. So that's why our numbers have heavily declined compared to other parks, which don't rely as much on revenue coming from rentals, especially indoor rentals. So just wanted to share those numbers in case you were interested. And then last slide, please. And I just want to thank everyone that's been involved, our past chair, Matt Baker, the committee that was present in fiscal year 2022, Sally, as well as Rick and the staff, and also you as council member. So if you have any questions, I'll take them, but otherwise, thanks for giving me this opportunity to present.
I just want to say that you've been a very strong chair. I've been the liaison from the council to this committee for 9 years. This has been the strongest committee year that we've had. And we're going into the largest project we've ever done in the park, which is the circulation plan. And that should be a wonderful project that really makes the park look different as you enter it. And I think the committee's been very involved and very positively involved. So thank you.
Thank you,
So
Mayor.
to the mayor, wait a minute, don't go away, Alex. The last meeting, I was your liaison, and I have to just thank you very much for stepping up, because there was no one that wanted to do the chairship. And so Alex had finished and there was no one that wanted to do it. And they, oh, I'm just too busy. I'm too busy, and we all are very busy. And Alex says, okay, I'll do it for one more year. So,
Counting on-
one
I
more
may
term.
present this again next year, but I'm counting on someone else taking over.
Right, at
next
the end of the year.
I
But-
think it's important that different residents get a chance to drive what Park and Rec do. So
Exactly. It's really a very important part of our whole town makeup, and people just need to know how important their voice is and to volunteer and be on that committee. And also, it's a lot of fun. You get to walk around in the park.
But it doesn't succeed without leadership.
That's right.
It really takes
Alex,
leadership, and you've
yeah.
provided that.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a proclamation, which I will read. And this is a proclamation from the town of Atherton in recognition of June, the month of June 2022 as Pride Month. And this is the proclamation. Whereas the City Council of the town of Atherton recognizes and proclaims the month of June 2022 LGBTQ Pride Month throughout the town of Atherton. And whereas the town of Atherton joins the county of San Mateo to observe Pride Month with a Progress Pride flag raising ceremony to honor the history of LGBTQ movement and to support the rights of all citizens to experience equality and freedom from discrimination. And whereas the Progress Pride flag is widely recognized as a symbol of pride, inclusion, and support for social movements that advocate for LGBTQ people in society. And whereas all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, LGBTQ individuals have had an immeasurable impact to the cultural, civic, economic successes of our country. And whereas the town of Atherton is committed to supporting visibility, dignity, and equality for LGBTQ people in our diverse community. And whereas while society at large increasingly supports LGBTQ equality, it is essential to acknowledge that the need for education and awareness remains vital to end discrimination and prejudice. And whereas this nation was founded on the principle that every individual has infinite dignity and worth, and the town of Atherton calls upon the people of this municipality to embrace this principle and to work to eliminate prejudice everywhere it exists. And whereas celebrating Pride Month influences awareness and provides support and advocacy for San Mateo County's LGBTQ community and is an opportunity to take action and engage in dialogue to strengthen alliances, build acceptance, and advance equal rights. Now, therefore, as mayor of the town of Atherton and on behalf of the entire Atherton City Council, that the town of Atherton hereby proclaims the month of June 22 as Pride Month in support of the LGBTQ community, and the Progress Pride flag was raised for the entire month of June to recognize LGBTQ residents whose influential and lasting contributions to our neighborhoods make the town of Atherton a vibrant community in which to live, work, and visit. And I'll sign that.
Thank you.
Okay. And The next item on the agenda should be public comment. This is public comment for matters that are typically not on the agenda. This is reserved for that. And for those that want to speak to matters on the agenda, we'll have public comment for each item as we come to it on the agenda. So is there anyone who wishes to make a general public comment for an item not on the agenda?
Yes, I would like to do that. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, Mark, go ahead.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
and
you.
let me just announce, because we expect a large number of comment tonight, particularly on the housing element issue, we've agreed that we would limit public comment to 2 minutes a person unless someone is speaking for a large group of people. And if they're speaking on behalf of a large group of people, then they will have 3 minutes.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, the purpose of that is honestly not to limit public comment. It's to manage our time, because
Sure.
we're very serious about not letting this council go on for an innumerable length of time. And I think that everyone who's here would appreciate that. So, and I know that everyone on this council would appreciate that. So that's the purpose of that limitation. We do expect quite a bit of comment tonight. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mark Dubovoy. I'm a 32-year resident of Atherton and love the town. And I would like to bring up some issues regarding the Atherton noise ordinance and the code enforcement of this ordinance. Unfortunately, I have a neighbor that is very problematic, and he is a repeat offender in terms of violating the noise code. A recent example is on Sunday, June 12th, he started a party with a DJ and live music, and the sound levels at my property violated the code continuously for 7.5 hours, with the exception of a couple of breaks. Because I knew about the party, the code officer warned the owner of the residence that they didn't, that they shouldn't exceed the noise levels. In spite of that, they did. There were 4 visits by uniformed law officers. And the party also continued past 10 p.m., which is the deadline, for another hour. The end result is that the consequences to the owner of the property that did this are probably going to be a $100 fine and maybe another $200 fine. And knowing this individual, that doesn't mean anything, and there's no deterrent. So obviously, I was wondering afterwards, why would this happen? Because our police is fantastic. We got the best of the best. I love them. They're always so great. And the more I think about it, I think it's because there's a lot of things that are left to the discretion of the officers. And if I were an officer, I would go, you know, I need to nail this board to fix the thing, but I don't have a hammer. And the problem is that we do not have a tool that is powerful enough to enforce the code. And I believe very strongly that the best way to do this would be to have something codified, like at some point, somebody's got to shut down the party or do something that will really deter this kind of behavior. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that as I was looking at the code, I realized that the Atherton noise code is very odd, very peculiar. I looked at all the other towns in the Bay Area, and basically everybody has a code where there are 2 noise levels. One is when people are active and awake, and another one is a quiet period at night. And there are no exceptions, so they don't care what you do at your home. Atherton has something
Mark, this is
called
Anthony, the city clerk. I hate to interrupt, but you've reached 3 minutes. So if you could do your best to bring it in.
Okay, yeah, I'll bring it in. Atherton has an exception, which is a social event exception where the noise level increases very dramatically to a point that I think any reasonable person would think that it is excessive. So I would appreciate it if someone could take a look at this, and I'll do whatever I can to help. I will be glad to give some demos so people don't get bogged down on dB levels and all kinds of technical stuff. Hearing is believing. I'll be glad to come to your office and show you what the noise level is and see if you think that that is reasonable. I am sure that you will conclude that it is too high. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Sorry, I
Mark.
took a little longer.
That's okay. What you should do, Mark, is write a letter to the council. We take letters very seriously. Everyone reads them. You should make specific suggestions and send it to us, and then we'll have your contact information so we could follow up. Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I don't see any other public comment at this time. The next item is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I met with each of you individually, went through the agenda packet to include the city manager's report. I addressed a couple of issues, but no significant questions, but staff's here to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions?
No,
Nope.
I had
Okay.
questions, but he answered them.
Okay, great. We like that.
Mhm.
The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. This covers items 7 through 18. Would anyone in the public like to remove any item on the consent calendar? Would anyone on the council like to remove anything on the consent calendar? Does anyone have any comments on anything on the consent calendar? No? Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So I've got a motion from Elizabeth and a second from Bill. We take a roll. We don't need a roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimously approved. The next item on the agenda is the housing element update and direction to staff. George?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I've had the opportunity to review this agenda item, as I mentioned earlier, with each member of the council individually prior to tonight's meeting. And while there are some varied opinions and perspectives, it is likely that the formative recommendations at the end of this meeting for direction to staff will include some rendition of the following substantive changes to the housing element before it gets submitted to the state. Number one, remove the proposal for multifamily overlays from the housing element. Number two, remove the first 3 bullets from the recommendations regarding proposed changes to the PFS zone, effectively retaining the requirement for CUPs and making no changes to heights and setbacks. Number 3, removing the comment regarding schools, specifically developing housing on campus that could be rented out to the general public. And number 4, removing the inclusionary ordinance provision as it would no longer be necessary without the overlay zoning. Other changes that will be made include data corrections that are related to acreages of school property, expansion of the history and outreach and participation to expand beyond the April 22nd community engagement meeting, and clarifying corrections throughout the document, and in particular, within the preliminary sections of the housing element in areas that address background analysis and data as it applies directly to Atherton. Specifically, the intent is to ensure that the housing element articulates the unique challenges facing the town with land affordability and our efforts to strongly encourage the production of ADUs. Staff also recommends that we include suggestions from the Housing Leadership Council where they are and remain applicable, as noted by staff in attachment 2. In addition, if the changes I noted earlier are undertaken, staff also recommends that the council consider allowing us to make minor adjustments to the housing unit production numbers to reflect the changes and resultant production expectations when the housing element returns to you for submission to HCD on July 27th. However, even with those changes, I believe that the town can achieve and possibly exceed its accessory dwelling unit production expectations, but that can only occur with a well-defined and high-functioning ADU production and rental program. And that will only occur with the full support of this community to not only build qualifying ADUs and JADUs on their property, but rent them at affordable rates and through an affordability program that will require the collection of rental and income data from their tenants. That participation will be a critical component to the success of the program and for the ability of the town to show that success to HCD. Since the town revised its ADU ordinance in the last few years, ADU production has skyrocketed. So I believe that our success here is achievable, but again, only with the full support of this community to follow through on the rental of those units. Even with a successful ADU program, we still fall short of the 348 units required by the state. If ADU production and rental goes as projected, we'll fall short in the very low and the above moderate income categories for housing production. To meet those objectives, we will need to show housing production through lot splits under Senate Bill 9 and the development of vacant lots in town. Those production categories also rely on residents to develop their property and make decisions to subdivide their property where practical and allow others to develop them. This type of production is going to be market-driven and will ebb and flow across the 8 years of the housing cycle. The last category addresses the need for workforce housing. This category of unit development relies largely on private schools to develop teacher, faculty, and non-dormitory style housing for students on their campuses. While some schools have identified the need and have identified funding to support that need, others have not. Menlo College, for example, has a need for teacher and faculty housing, and they can identify space on campus to place that housing, but they struggle with the ability to finance that solution. Perhaps there are some opportunities for private partnerships that can make that a reality for them. If those opportunities are to be realized, they need to be formally proposed so that the town can report them to HCD. A small portion of the solution also rests with Cal Water at Bear Gulch, where they have committed to developing some workforce housing for their own staff. Lastly, I concur with many of the comments that have been echoed by this community that there needs to be further public education and engagement on the housing element. From that, we may even be able to develop additional out-of-the-box solutions that'll help the town achieve the targets mandated by the state. Staff suggests that we begin that engagement in late September after we have heard some of the initial feedback from HCD so that we know where to apply that creative thinking. I do not believe that we should attempt to craft these solutions tonight until we've heard back from HCD on where we should focus that attention. I also want to be very clear that if the town removes all of the items I noted earlier, enhances our ADU production to a level that meets or exceeds our expectations, and creates other opportunities, and still the state denies our housing element for certification, some of the solutions or variations of those solutions discussed may return in the future for reconsideration by the council. To ensure that we fulfill the obligations of public education and engagement, I'm going to now turn the presentation over to Town Planner Lisa Costa-Sanders here, who will walk through the staff report as it relates to the housing element before any changes are made by the council. Following that presentation, the council, of course, can ask for clarifying questions and then continue other further public comment before specific direction to staff. That concludes my portion. I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening. It's nice to be here in person. It's
Nice
been
to
quite
see
some
you,
time.
Lisa.
Good to see
Yes.
everybody. Lisa Costa-Sanders, Town Planner. And I'll just be giving a very brief overview of the draft housing element and the public comments that we've received. So the purpose of this meeting is to review the public comments on the draft housing element and receive direction from the City Council on revisions to the element prior to submittal to HCD. As you're aware, all California cities are required to accommodate their fair share of regional housing needs as determined by the state and ABAG. This housing element cycle that we're reviewing update covers the 8-year planning period of 2023 to 2031. The town's draft housing element update was made available to the public on June 10th for a 30-day public review and comment period. This is the housing need allocation as established by ABAG for the next element cycle, total of 348 net new housing units. And the current housing element has identified several programs in which to achieve this new production: accessory dwelling units, multifamily housing at the schools in Bear Gulch, lot splits under SB 9, and townhouse overlay zone. And I'll briefly walk through each of those. So for the accessory dwelling units, we've identified in the plan development of 35 new ADU or JADU units per year during the next housing element cycle for a total of 280 units. The affordability assumptions is based on a study that was accepted by ABAG that places 30% of the units in very low, 30 low, 30% moderate, and 10% in the above moderate income categories. To further encourage the rental of these units, we have a program to partner with a local nonprofit organization to assist in matching property owners with interested renters. As noted in the staff report, staff did have a virtual meeting with HCD to review some of the programs in the housing element, and HCD expressed concern with the production assumptions and requested that the data be back to 2018 with the average based on that production. This would result in 192 housing units as opposed to the 280 that we have in here. The next item I mentioned is the multifamily housing at the school in Bear Gulch. So the program included in the housing element talks about amending the PFS zone, which is where the schools in Bear Gulch are located, to allow multifamily housing by right, adjust the setback and height limits to accommodate the new housing development. There's also a program to consider expanding the PFS zone to adjacent properties to allow multifamily housing if they're acquired by the school. As well, allow additional housing units at the Bear Gulch Reservoir for Cal Water employees to sit with its distant employee commutes and retention. California Senate Bill SB 9 permits splitting of single-family lots into 2 parcels and the construction of up to 2 dwelling units on each parcel. The town adopted implementing regulations to encourage new development comply with current development standards. And we have seen pretty good interest in this with our new ordinance. So based on that interest level, the town estimates a total of 80 new housing units from SB 9 projects over the next 8 years. Relating to the townhouse overlay, the council spent quite some time reviewing maps and studying the town and identified several sites to include in an overlay zone with densities ranging from 6 to 16 dwelling units per acre. With an overlay, the single-family home would remain as a permitted use, and property owners would have the option to construct multifamily housing up to the permitted density. If included, a portion of the new units would be restricted as affordable with a new inclusionary ordinance. And based on those programs, the housing element has this production estimates. As I indicated, 280 accessory dwelling units, 80 in the lot splits. There's some vacant properties that could be developed. We see about 1 or 2 net new units a year, so we've included those. The townhome overlay just assumes 2 of the sites would be developed during this 8-year cycle, not all of them as identified. The school and faculty sites at 34 units, and then that total is 462, and we've divided it into the different income categories as I indicated. So the housing element's been out for a 30-day public review and comment period. In addition to comments received at the community meeting, planning commission meeting, and city council meetings, the town has received nearly 300 written public comments on the draft housing element, in addition to 2 letters from housing advocates. The town is required to consider the public input prior to submitting the draft housing element to HCD. The majority of the resident comments expressed concern with the proposed multifamily housing. Many comments also expressed support for multifamily housing at the school, but several of those commenters expressed concern with changes to the current PFS zoning and expanding it to the single-family properties. Most commenters also expressed support for ADU development and rental of those units. As I indicated, we did receive 2 comment letters from housing advocates, and many of the suggestions from the Housing Leadership Council can be addressed as outlined in the attachment to the staff report. So the options before the council: submit the draft housing element as prepared with minor revisions to clarify the ADU production as well as housing at the school sites. You could also entirely reconsider the inclusion of each property in the multifamily overlay. So you can look at each property, decide on a property by property basis if you want to continue to include it, or if you want to adjust the density, or you can consider removing the overlay program entirely due to the public comments that have been submitted. If you remove the multifamily housing overlay zone entirely, there's a suggestion that we include 170 Atherton Avenue under the SB 9 program, as this site could accommodate 30 net new units under existing regulations as authorized by state law. So based on those, if the council were to remove the townhome overlay program and include 170 Atherton property in the SB 9 assumptions, this shows you the resulting production. So it would reduce to 434 total, which is still above our RENA allocation. So there's still a buffer in there. So based on the feedback we received from the city council tonight, staff will revise the housing element and bring it back to your next meeting on July 27th for authorization to submit to HCD. The town will then submit the draft housing element to the state for its 90-day preliminary review and comment period. And then the housing element's targeted for completion by the fall of this year and state certification by January of next year. I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions, and I look forward to your feedback on that housing element. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so how we normally do this, we have a proposal from staff, is we take questions of clarification from the council. We then take public comments, And then only after the public comments do the council give their initial comments on the matters. Last month, when we dealt with the housing element and we had quite a number of speakers, we slightly modified that. And tonight is different than last month because tonight we're not just reacting to the comments that we've received, and we've received more than 300 letters from members of the community and some letters from those that aren't in the community but are concerned with the issue. And so the purpose of tonight is to both give the council the opportunity to respond to those comments and maybe weigh in with their changed thoughts as a result of the receipt of those comments and the passage of time and more thinking about this extremely important issue to all of us. But also tonight, we're intending to give direction to the staff on what changes will occur to the published housing element that all of you have read. So with the support of the council, if you agree with it, what I would suggest tonight is that we allow the council to ask any questions of clarification and to make any initial preliminary comments that you may have. I think it'll help the public if the council gives some initial comments that shares with you the reactions that the council have had to all of the commentary that's come in over the last month. And then we'll take the public comment. And I really, this is not to discourage any public comment. I want to encourage anyone who has public comment to provide it. And then after that, the council can give specific direction or suggested direction. We can discuss what that should be to the staff. Does that sound like a good plan?
It
Okay.
does to me.
Okay,
That's
great. Okay, so I think I have that
well-organized.
approval. Let's proceed. Are there any questions of clarification that anyone has? I have one question,
Okay,
which
I
is,
do after you.
okay, great. Which is, Lisa, in the course, and we, in the course of this whole process, which is now, I don't know, in its 7th or 8th month for us, we've really been very focused on the numbers. And in the last month, I've come to realize it's not just the numbers, it's also the issue of profitability that is critical and part of the heart of this process that the state is pushing on. And so my question is, when I look at the numbers that we've got, in particular, I'm looking at the numbers from the schools and the breakdown of the projected new housing units that the schools would build based on this strategy, and the breakdown between very low, low, moderate, and above moderate, they're not equal. There's a lower number for very low. And you explained how the allocations came out for the ADUs, but I didn't hear that for the schools. So the question is, how is it that we end up with a lower number for the schools on very low?
Yeah, so this was just staff's estimation on what that production might look like. This would include the schools as well as Bear Gulch employee housing. So it's unlikely that that employee housing would qualify in the very low and low income category. Also with the faculty housing, it may not just be a single faculty member that qualifies, but it could be a couple or a small family living in the unit. And so that total income then would be considered. And so we gave an estimation based on, experience we have in other projects as to where that breakdown might lie.
So
We
that's
can-
experience with what's been done at the schools previously?
Just general with other communities. Yeah,
Okay.
so what we could do though is reach out to the schools and try to get more accurate information as we work forward on this.
Okay, great. Okay, Elizabeth, you had a question?
Yes, in your presentation, you talked about the lot split for 170. That essentially, without the town doing anything about it, it's legally to essentially take that piece of property and lot split it according to SB 9, and you come up with 30 new units. And that needs to kind of sink in, because I think that, and is that for the whole 8-acre parcel or just the 170, which is the 4-acre parcel?
Correct. It would be for the entire 8-acre parcel.
Okay, which is,
So there's,
it's different addresses.
It currently
Yeah,
consists of 3 parcels.
Right.
A 2-acre, a 4-acre, and another 2-acre.
Mhm.
And so if they were to subdivide those by current Atherton standards, you would get 8 1-acre parcels.
That could be
And then
subdivided.
you would take,
split.
you would apply SB 9, you would take those
16.
8 and get 16 because you could split them.
Mhm,
And then you have the legal ability to build 2 units on each.
mhm.
You have a total of 32. There's 2 houses there now, so the net's 30.
Right, plus an ADU or an JADU.
We just have 2 SB 9 units. We don't also allow an additional ADU.
Oh,
So it'd be a
okay.
maximum of 2 units
Even though
per
they would
new
be
lot.
a half acre each. Yeah, okay,
Mhm,
got it.
That's
All right.
correct.
And the townhome overlay for the 4-acre, then with the other 2 parcels would be, as I understood it, kept as a lot, an acre each. And anyway, houses, it would be like 34 was the original, 32 was the original
Correct.
estimate of the 4-acre plus 2 1-acre lots on either side. 32 plus 4 is 36. So what we're talking about,
And
I
then
just-
the
this-
removal of the 2 existing.
right? Yeah, okay. So just kind of putting that in perspective on that.
Can I follow up with a question on that?
Sure.
Because I thought the way SB 9 worked is you took what the property was that exists. And in this case, you've got a 2-acre, a 4-acre, and a 2-acre parcel. They're not divided into single 1-acre parcels.
But legally, you can divide.
They have the
them
legal ability to
can,
do
into
that.
1-acre parcels,
But-
according to Atherton, without anything.
Well,
Mhm.
but sure, but you could do that with any parcel in Atherton that's more than an acre. You could subdivide it if it's 2 acres or more,
Mhm.
but maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding of SB 9 is it takes the size of the property and it, irregardless of whether it's 5 acres or 2,000 square feet. And the SB 9 allows you to divide it in half and then to build 2 units on each half.
But you could divide it under today's standards to create those 1 acres, come back 5 years later, apply SB 9 or the next day. And I'll defer to the city attorney if I'm incorrect with my application
She's
here.
right.
You could legally subdivide under today's standards to create the 1 acre each.
Okay, so do you have a question?
I do have a question. So just so that I understand, under SB 9, is there any qualifications of what has to be built? Does it have to be a main house and an ADU? And are there definitions for what those are? Or can they then go in and make could they make a complex of a bunch of little houses, which is basically what they were
No.
You
no,
would
not with
you would
this.
have a max of 2 houses on each lot.
houses? And are
Correct.
those size requirements?
Yes, it's based on the floor area ratio for the property or 800 square feet if you've applied that 4-foot setback. So there are maximums in there, yes, and it would comply with today's height limits as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it'd be really, it gets a little complicated with the SB 9 lot splits. And honestly, I have to be very honest with you. I fought tooth and nail to not let that pass because I think it is a very complicated and very dangerous slippery slope for a lot of jurisdictions, especially ours. So, but because it's law, it's codified in, people are embracing it and they're going, well, you know, I'm going to take my 1 acre lot. I'm going to split it 60-40 or 50-50. I'm going to build, you know, a house for myself because I got to live in 1/2 of it for 3 years. And I'm going to put 2 little 800 units on the other side. And you can, you know, build up to 4 feet from your neighbor's property on that. But so just by that, Atherton is going to change. Because it already is, you know, our big 1 acre lots are going to be cut into 1/2 acres and subdivided, either 60% of an acre or 40% or 50-50. Those are the 2 dimensions you can divide it into. So it's complicated. So, and then, but you can't put an ADU on that 1/2 that you build a house on, right?
Sure you can.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking you today.
You could have a maximum of 2 units per lot.
And if
period.
you go by the 4 feet setback that allows by the state, you can't put more than 800 square
Square.
feet in total on that lot?
For each
For each
unit,
unit.
two 800 square foot units on that 1/2 lot. Yeah. Mhm.
Two 400 square foot units?
Two 800 square foot units.
I thought the way that we said it was that 800 square feet
No,
was the
it's
maximum.
two 800 square. Foot. Yeah,
Nobody's building an 800 square foot unit. Yeah.
but they're going to rent it as like a little duplex.
Okay. What's that?
We
Is
gotta
there,
make
Oh,
comments.
Mona, hi.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to provide a little bit of clarification. Mayor DeGolia, you are correct in your interpretation of Senate Bill 9 in that we do take the lot as it is. The reason why 170 can be treated a little bit differently is because even though the acreage is considerable, it's actually comprised of 3 separate lots. But Senate Bill 9 expressly states that any person or any person acting in concert with the existing owner cannot come back and continue year after year or 5 years later to subdivide further their property. If they wanted to do that, they'd have to apply for a tentative subdivision map. The Senate Bill 9 lot split allows it one time. So you can come and divide your lot one time. And it has to either be equal sized lots or a 60-40 split. Each new lot has to be at least 1,200 feet. The town's SB 9,
1,200 feet, 12,000 feet.
1,200 square feet.
The under the town's normal development standards for an ADU. But just to clarify, Mona,
Yes,
the property owner today, owner of those 8 acres, can
Yes.
come in and subdivide that 8 acres into individual 1 acre parcels, not under SB 9, under current law, subdivide them into minimum 1 acre parcels.
through a
Current law.
tentative subdivision map.
Correct.
Correct.
And
And
then if they're individually sold, that owner can then come in, each 1 acre parcel can subdivide under SB 9 under separate ownership. Doesn't mean it will happen, just means that it could happen.
okay,
I think that's all we're saying under the SB 9, because that's all speculation with respect to the housing element.
Exactly. I mean, if you
Okay.
got, yeah.
yeah, let's move on and give the initial comments. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, so.
Wait,
but-
he had a
initial
question.
Oh, you have a question?
Sorry,
Okay,
no, I'm
sorry.
saying we're taking
Still do.
questions right now, right? Not
Uh,
comments.
Questions
If
first,
there are more
comments.
questions, do you have
Go
a
ahead.
question?
I do have a question, but
Okay,
Go ahead. I have a comment.
he has a
Okay.
comment. So go ahead. Questions come
So-
first.
His comments are referring to
in the
his comments.
housing element, I find it, the amount of statistics rather mind-boggling. And I can't help but think a lot of them are fictitious. But the one that concerns me a little bit, only because it may affect how HCD came to our numbers, is that it claims we have, the report claims we have 2,700
Jobs.
jobs in
Yeah.
the town of Atherton.
Yeah.
Now, I have no idea how many are employed at each of our schools. It's not an insignificant number. But to get from there to 2,700,
It's
throw in the circus club,
construction.
I'm
workers.
still having a hard time figuring this out. Are these transitory jobs? Are they part-time jobs? Does the gardener count?
So the information we have gathered is the only data source that we can find through our 21 Elements Housing Group is really the State Department of Finance and ABAG MTC. And it's reported based on zip code. And the zip code extends a bit beyond the town boundaries. So what I'd like to do is just try to do a little bit of research to see if we can extract some of those jobs and have a little bit of more information in there to clarify that's not the
Well,
total
I
jobs in the
don't, I
town.
don't want you tilting at windmills here.
No, but we can,
I'm
I think
just
we
saying
can
that
add on to
if
that.
we count all the
conversation.
gardeners and housekeepers, the number is going to be way bigger than 2,700. But if you count full-time employed people who would like to live where they work, I question the number, I think is dramatically high. And does it impact? Maybe it doesn't matter.
It does.
ABAG uses the state information in order to generate the application of the housing element numbers. And then it's applied to all the jurisdictions based on a lot of different factors.
So
Jobs.
it might matter.
Job proximity is one factor. And proximity is also taking into consideration Menlo Park jobs and not entirely Atherton jobs.
And
But I
Redwood-
do agree,
and Palo
we can
Alto and
clarify
Redwood
that a
City.
bit, yeah, in the housing element. And its quality of schools, there's a lot of different factors they take into consideration.
All right, then don't waste your time on it.
You're right.
Just to follow up on that on the question side, the other statistic that was related to that said that in the recent period, the number of jobs increased in Atherton by 29 some odd %, which was equally unbelievable to me.
I think there was a spike in 2010 when all of that went up. And you look at the graphs that she has in here, there's this ginormous spike in 2010. And that's when our construction, a building Zoom a frenzy really started. If you all remember, in about 2010, that's when I remember, because I was on council at the same time, and I had roomfuls of people complaining about construction noise. It was just, a sea change. And there, if you look at the charts, it's repeated in several charts at 2010, all those numbers go up.
But I don't see how construction workers end up being in a 94027 job
Zip
data number.
Zip
I
code.
mean, it's not, that 94027 is not on their W-2. I just don't get it.
Yeah, when
could be.
ABAG came to us and explained those numbers,
Mm.
I questioned those numbers as well as the population growth, pointing out that our population had not grown in the last 20 some odd years.
It's gone down.
And it turned out from their answers that it was an allocation that came from the county growth, population growth, and job growth. And we don't have that here in Atherton. And so I think that really some of the numbers that we got, in the housing allocation, are based on really not specific data to Atherton and probably into other towns also like Hillsborough. However, I have some other comments on the housing element. First off, I thank everybody who wrote to me. I believe I wrote back to everybody. Some people wrote multiple times. I tried to write back to them each time. The overwhelming input was, people think that first off, we have, without the overlays and things like that, we have 404 houses in the projection. And so that exceeds 348. And as such, their input and, my input really is, I think the overlays should come out, for this submittal. I think that they've caused a lot of new awareness by the residents, which I think is a good thing. But also, sometimes people's imaginations have really made them bigger, but I do believe that we should take those overlays out. There's been a lot of input from people in Victoria Manor with regards to fear of what the schools or the college might do. My response to them is that, anybody can buy a piece of property if it's for sale, whether it's a school or whether it's anything else. And they can subdivide it and they can build, a house as well as ADU, et cetera. So, but there's concern over, the changes to the CUP, and essentially almost automatic zoning change, which I think we've got procedures for making those decisions. And I don't think we should run roughshod over the community, and we shouldn't run roughshod over our procedures with this. I know that the college and the school would like to do some things. And I really feel that, what the college would like to do is not buy a bunch of property and then build on top of it, what the college wants to do is build on land they already own because it's a heck of a lot cheaper to do. And so, you hope that they can do that. I think that your comments with regards to 170, I think are good. But deciding that everybody would do a lot split, I don't think that that would happen. You have to use the same type of percentages that we've used elsewhere and building ADUs and having a lot split. So I think that would shrink down to maybe one lot would get a lot split. I think the rest of them in today's environment, building, homes, let's say by PPG or somebody like that, they do build a home and then they also build an ADU. So we should assume that every house that gets built there is going to have an ADU, but I don't believe that each of them, that's a far exaggeration of what I think could happen. That's essentially, my comments. So I'd like to see the overlays out. I mentioned at the June meeting, and I think there was, pretty much same consenting from other people about maybe the overlays need to be reconsidered. I think that the stuff by Victoria Manor needs to be reconsidered. But I do appreciate everybody who wrote to me or came to see me and spoke to me. I've been pretty consistent giving those messages to them. That's how I felt, and I still feel that way. Nothing has changed. Thank you.
Others?
I'm gonna go last, so you guys.
Well, I'm happy to comment.
Mayor goes last.
I don't have to. She can go left if she wants. Okay.
I echo George basically outlined the feelings of the council in his preliminary speech. But George talks awfully fast, so I doubt that you all got it. I know you didn't make notes that fast. So I think you're going to find the council is kind of most of us have similar feelings. Mine have definitely evolved. And I like to think the other folks up here that their thoughts on this have evolved too. As we understand what's involved, both from each and every resident's point of view, because if it varies dramatically. Unfortunately, a lot of it is just plain NIMBY, but a lot of it isn't. So my feelings have evolved. However, I will state, and I've said this in many of the letters that I've sent to people, I think a quality, well-planned, well-managed project like the one that was proposed at 170 Atherton Avenue that builds no affordable housing, it builds 32 low-profile, high-end, over and under townhouses with adequate parking, preferably designed for the senior community so it doesn't contribute to any rush hour traffic to speak of. I think a product like that will have no negative impact on land values, and other than short-term construction issues, won't have any effect of consequence on the life of the people that live around there. And I compare that to the wild, wild west that we're going to have going on with ADU construction and SB 9 lot splits, 4-foot setbacks, and so on and so on. So I don't think a project like 170 will affect Atherton as we know it. In fact, I don't think any project of that nature, if there are a few of them, overall, nobody's going to notice it. But SB 9 and ADUs is going to affect us. So I'd rather see a few good projects to get us to where we need to be by law than rely on, as I said, the wild, wild west.
You want to go, or do you want the men to go and then the women to go?
No.
We usually let the women go first, but
Well,
you're welcome.
I was happy to let the vice mayor and our esteemed temporary councilman go
Okay.
before me, but I think we're going this way now.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so, I don't want Atherton to change. Nobody wants Atherton to change. It is just heartbreaking and sickening to think that we're facing this from the state. And so many of the comments that I received, and of course, we all received all the letters. Thank you all for writing all your letters and for being so involved. I really, really appreciate it. And I think this 30-day process has worked really well. But the thing is that what are we going to do? And so we have to do something. I think we were trying to be very thoughtful when we did the 3 vacant lots. It wasn't going to disrupt people living in homes. We didn't say, let's do a townhome overlay on a neighborhood of existing homes that were in existence. But I understand that it's those, anyway, they're not working for the majority of the residents. And I understand that. And I understand that we should try to push back on the state. We should try to push back on the state and do what we can, put our best foot forward and say, this is a very special community. We don't have any commercial. We don't have any retail. We don't have any businesses here to create lots of jobs. I also feel, just as my colleague did, about the numbers of jobs that are listed in this report. And I asked the city manager about that. I said, where did this number come from? It's certainly not the schools. It's construction and service workers and things like that. So I just think that needs to be refined, because what it's showing is that Atherton has more jobs than we have people to, fill them around here or live here. So I think that I've heard our residents loud and clear. They don't want any townhome overlays on any of the vacant lands. And what they're saying is, go to the schools, get them to build more housing for their students and their faculties. And we are in talks with Menlo College about building, a significant new faculty building, true housing units with kitchens and bathrooms, not a dorm like. But that's not going to happen within this cycle. And then the other thing people say, but you need to do the overlay along El Camino. Okay. If you're going to do overlay, do it along El Camino. Okay. So you guys tell me, what block of El Camino and what houses are you going to, impact? That would be, from Victoria Manor all the way up to the north at Redwood City, all along there. And, I'm not ready to do that. So I'm willing to do the best we can and make our best arguments about the ADUs and the SB9, because SB9 is there, the ADUs are legal, and put it out to the HCD and see what they say, and hope for the best. We know what's going to, and then what we'll hear back and we'll try to make adjustments. We'll go out and do a lot of public outreach and education starting in September. I'm talking too long, aren't I?
That's okay.
I'm sorry. You shouldn't have.
Because you're on the council, you're not limited to 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Anyway,
Okay,
so that's my feelings.
First, I want to thank the residents for the tremendous response that we've gotten since this housing element was published. It's really significant. We got more than 300 emails from 300 different residents. That is the largest contact from the residents to this council in at least 10 years and probably in 40 years. It's a really big deal. And I really thank everyone for doing that. This is the way that democracy works, and it's the way that you influence your representatives. It has also given us an opportunity to pull back and really think about the issue. And I try to approach all of these issues as your representative from a strategic perspective. I really try to think about things strategically, and it takes time to do that properly. And what I've realized in this last month, like I said in the introduction, is that this issue just isn't about the numbers of housing units that we need to create. It's also about creating affordable housing. And both of those tenets are critical in this whole housing element. We've pretty much focused mostly on the numbers because this was new to us. I mean, this is not something that we deal with all the time. And what I've realized in the last month, and I think it's really true, is that in Atherton, you can't build affordable housing if you have to buy the land. If you have to buy the land, you can't build something that's affordable. The land costs about $8 million an acre. If you're going to pay $8 million an acre, you can't offer an affordable residence to somebody. It's just not doable. The only way that you can really reasonably offer affordable housing in Atherton is if you offer it on the existing land that people own. And for those of us that are residents, that means ADUs. That's the real only reasonable way that an affordable dwelling unit can be offered to somebody. And it means offering it at below fair market value. But that's doable. You can choose to do that if you wish to. As a school where you have enough property, and Sacred Heart has 60 acres, Menlo School has 30 some acres, Menlo College has about 30 acres. There is land that can be used to develop housing on those properties, and it can be affordable, but not if they buy an adjacent property and try to develop the housing on that adjacent property. That's not going to be affordable. You can put it through whatever measure you want to, but if they're paying $8 million for that acre of property, they can't build affordable housing. That's a real serious revelation. And it's really different for Atherton than it is for some other communities, including communities very close to us. And the Housing Authority needs to be able to understand that. And we need to understand that so that we can develop a program that really works for them. And in George's introduction, he said, one thing we can do is put in place a really serious program to encourage and perhaps incentivize residents to rent their ADUs out at affordable rates. And we have to think about what that's going to be. That has some real serious implications. What satisfies the state housing department? I mean, I know one thing that satisfies them is if you deed restrict that property, but that's a non-starter. We're not going to deed restrict property. If somebody wants to do that, we can create a program and welcome it, but that's not going to be a serious program. A serious program would be where Atherton residents really want to make a unit in their backyard available to somebody who's working for them or working in the neighborhood or teaching at a school or I think we can develop that kind of a program, and we can work with a nonprofit to identify that. But I think mostly we're going to probably need to work with the residents in the schools. So when I put this in perspective, that you just can't develop affordable housing if you buy the land, that makes me realize that the overlay is not to build affordable housing. It wasn't to build affordable housing, and the overlay numbers didn't fit into the low and very low income category because you can't offer it affordable if you are buying the land and developing something. I think that what you laid out in the beginning, George, in terms of taking the overlay out of the entire housing element is the right thing. It's the right thing because I don't think you can develop affordable housing that way. But I also think that this is July, and many people in Atherton are on vacation. I got lots of the letters that we got came from people who weren't here, and they weren't here because we've all been locked up for 2 years. And this is the first year that people have gotten away. And we shouldn't penalize them with creating some kind of a policy that is a dramatic policy. And if we were to authorize overlay zoning in Atherton, that's a dramatic policy. That's a really big change for us. And there's no way that I can support that without fully engaging the community in a really thorough set of discussions. And what we've done to date is we've brought the issue forward. We've tried really hard to get it out there, and people have responded now, but it's only in the last month. So I think the right answer is to take it out of this filing, to have a much more robust discussion after we get the initial comments back from HCD, and to evaluate that in meetings in September and October, where we can more fully engage all of you that have commented to us. We can really have more discussion about it, and we can look into what this program around ADUs would look like. With respect to the schools, I think that the CUP program that we have right now, and the way that this conditional use permit program works, is that if a school buys a property that they wish to change the zoning on that property from R1, which is single family, to PFS, which is a school property zone, then they have to apply to the Planning Commission to do that. And I think it also goes to the council as a zone change. And I think that's the right procedure. That gives notice to all the residents in the area. That gives a very comprehensive set of meetings and discussions which can occur, where residents can express their concerns about it. We can really evaluate if we want to put some conditions on that zone change, such as they can't build certain kinds of housing on it. We can do that. And mostly it just gives residents the ability to engage with a change that may really affect them in their immediate neighborhood. So I don't want to change that. I think we need to keep that. With respect to in the housing element proposals, there were some suggested height and setback changes. If the schools were to build right now, the schools are limited, I believe, to 35 feet, which is basically 2 stories. And the proposal was that if they want to build a 3-story building for housing, they could do that as long as it faces a El Camino Real, which is a state highway, or an arterial street, which is Valparaiso. Personally, I don't have a problem with that, but I think it's something that, again, we don't have to approve at this point. I think the suggestion to pull that out is right, and I think the suggestion to pull out the reference that was an odd reference in there about how, if the schools build more housing, they may rent it to the public for financial reasons. It's not our concern to support the schools to financially, to address that from a financial perspective. That's their issue. I don't think we need to comment on that.
I think that's to rent it to the general public or something.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
on page 40.
Yeah, that's not our issue.
Right.
So that's my perspective. I think I think there's a lot more to do on this, and just so everyone understands, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I mean, we're due to have our housing element approved by January 31st, but Los Angeles and Orange counties are 15.5 months ahead of us. They were due to have their housing elements approved last October 15th. This is 9 months after that, and 117 of 125 jurisdictions still aren't approved. So we get to watch them and see what happens to them, and see how serious the consequences are that may occur to them before it even comes to us. We've got at least a year here during which we're going to be engaged in discussions with the State Housing Authority, and it's going to be a back and forth set of discussions. So this is a marathon. We have plenty of time to make sure we do it right, and this is a big deal. We need to make sure we do it right.
I just want to say that I also agree with the idea of pulling back the overlays and until we're able to study them more and get more feedback from people. And I feel confident that we can go forward with this with just ADUs. And I want to point out that some of the stuff in our element right now is actually very good. And in case some of you haven't read them all, let me just point to a few of them. We're talking about the existing pool houses that now people have pool houses that they are not allowed to rent for more than 30 days. We've suggested you be able to rent them longer. And we now have all those go out and get them all registered so we know how many, so they would count toward our numbers. I think that the idea of getting the HIP, which is a nonprofit that places people in these rental properties, we could reach out to them and get a program set up that's specific to Atherton, to the kind of people we'd want, so that they may be able to help us find graduate students, teachers, people like that to actual rent, and have the nonprofit be able to do that for us. They're already set up to do that, but have them do it specifically for our community. I'd like to see us do grandfathering like other cities have done. So you grandfather any existing buildings that are not on the record right now, and we pull those out. Other cities have done pre-approved ADU designs to make it streamlined. So there's these whole set of buildings that you can just buy that are prefab. We could put those, we could review those. One of the bigger ideas is revisiting some of our other rules in the future, like putting ADUs above garages. The inventory of garages in Atherton is huge and nobody can build above them because of the current rules. If we do that, I think that that would open up a whole new inventory of ADUs and make our numbers really change. And as an environmentalist, I think that's a good idea, because now you're building on top of an existing structure. You're not covering up more grass. You're not building compounds. You're just building on top of existing structures. So there's a lot of things we can do. So I think there's a lot of stuff already in there, if you haven't read it, that are actually quite good ideas, and many more we could do. I'd like to see us do an ad hoc committee to look a little deeper. As Rick was saying, it's really, I looked at this issue of how do we get low income housing in a town like Atherton, and the point he made about the land. I mean, I was trying to figure out, well, could we do something near Selby Lane School? Because that's a low income school. Wouldn't it be great to do that? But every single property anywhere near there, as he said, is $8 million plus. So the numbers just don't make sense. But I'd like to see us put together an ad hoc committee that also interfaces with the community to see if there's sources of grants. And there are some grants out there. There's grants for teachers, rent, and there's other programs that are just being rolled out. And other cities have begun to build teacher housing. So where does that go? How do we fund it? That's really some of the details that we really need to work out. I'd love to see us start to work on that going forward. And also part of that would be coming up with avenues of how to rent to low income in a way that's comfortable for our ADUs. And on the teacher housing that was put in our thing, and I read a lot of the letters, and some of the letters had misinformation on them. People were under the impression that we were proposing that you go in a cul-de-sac near the schools and build a 60-foot building. That's not at all. From my understanding, the ones that were in there were all on the properties. They were all within the university already. They were not in the neighborhood. So the 3 complexes that are identified as 3 stories were all on campus. They weren't in neighborhoods. And second, the thought bubble is everyone's thinking it's like we're proposing we pull a fraternity in the end of your driveway. We're talking about, housing for teachers, which would be more like Professorville and Stanford. So it's a different idea. But anyway, aside from all of that, I think that we need to listen to what people had to say. And there were things in there I didn't agree. I don't think that they should be rented to the public myself. I think they should be teacher housing. So I think that we should pull back on some of the ones. I agree with all the ones that were pulled out so far that George said at the beginning, and he did go pretty fast. But I agree with all of those, pulling all of those out. And I think we should, again, circle back to the residents on that and make a better plan, maybe through an ad hoc committee where we address more specifically some of those concerns and get the real information out. Because I think, judging by the letters, there was a lot of misinformation that went out into the neighborhoods about what the ideas were there.
Can I make one quick comment?
Okay.
With regards to trying to find renters, I think, Lisa, one of the key things might be to contact both Stanford as well as the colleges, specifically Menlo College. At Stanford, they have students that are joining together and living in those trailers and those campers that are on the road because they don't have another place to live. I think I've mentioned at a meeting, when I was teaching over at Menlo College, I had, a couple students that were living out of their cars. I got them housing, but they know who might need it, and they can also publicize it in addition to HIP housing. And so I think we have, quite an access to students that would be good renters. We should put that in our report as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
To the mayor, I'd like a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Tag on to that. So I just, it's in the literature about when we start, depending upon our pool houses, if we convert them, they're going to go on the list. They'll be a part of a registered list, because we're going to file it with the HCD as well as these ADUs, and that will then be rented. And the homeowner is going to have to agree and verify that they're actually renting these units. Would you like to follow up with that and kind of clear me up a little bit? I just
Well,
want to.
we're not actually publishing a list or anything, but we need to be able to document through a nonprofit like HIP Housing, the units are rented and at what affordability rate. And that includes reporting the income levels of the.
Right,
the
so they
tenants
actually
up to
have to
rents.
become a rental. I mean, I know so many people have an ADU or a pool house that is not being rented, it's just kind of like an extra bedroom here or there. But if we, want to put it into our housing element as counting towards this, RENA number, that has to happen. And that's a different mindset.
It has to happen as part of our annual evaluation that we report to HCD every year. You reported that statistic back in February or so.
Right.
You got that annual report. The follow-up annual reports that HCD is going to be requiring in the future are going to be far more aggressive in the data that they're going to want.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay.
So I have
you
a
understand
question
that?
on that. Yes. HCD has said, and I saw this in the Housing Leadership Council letter, they're focused on, I think it's from 2018 or 2019 to the present. We took a shorter period of time because there'd been increased production of ADUs in the short term. So my question is, they probably want to confirm a number. It takes something to confirm a number, or you could say to justify a number. And they're using the 1918 or 1919 history to try to spread that number out so that they can be more comfortable that it's going to happen. I assume there's some other evidence that could also be convincing to them. For instance, if they were to get letters from residents that said, I want to build an ADU, that probably is meaningful. If they get letters from residents that said, I want to rent my ADU, at an affordable rate, or I'm not sure exactly what the right language would be, but there's got to be some kind of criteria that the housing authority would accept to justify a number for additional housing.
So yes, you're correct. They want to see, data going back a certain period of time to justify what the new production is going to be. And what we tried to explain in the housing element, and HCD hasn't seen this yet, right? Is that from the years we were counting forward, there were code changes that were substantial enough to justify the increased numbers. So
Right.
there's a reason the numbers are higher. There's a reason we selected those dates. It wasn't
Right.
arbitrary. And we're proposing new programs to justify that increase in number.
Yeah.
And that's additional outreach. We can add the pre-approved ADU plans, additional incentives. And so we're trying to justify why those productions are going to be higher than they were in those earlier years.
Right,
Yes.
right, good. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's
Follow-up question on that.
go ahead.
In the document, it talks about a survey. Is that literally a survey that we would do of all our residents, or is it a survey that you would,
We've
at the
done
time that
surveys.
you're applying to build? Like, how do we get that? Is there, can we answer, like he was saying, instead of having people write individual letters, can we send out a survey and would that work?
Well, what we do right now is when somebody submits for a building permit application that includes an ADU, we ask them if they intend to rent it and at what income level, and we keep that data, right? But we haven't done a town-wide survey since the last housing element,
Long time
actually,
ago.
which we did, to find out how many are rented and at what income. And when they sent the information, it was confidential. It didn't have the address on it, and we didn't need it, right? We needed the aggregate data. We didn't need the details by address. So what we're suggesting in the plan going forward is that after the plan's adopted, we would do a survey to find out how many in an inventory, right? So then we would have the list, we can help with the nonprofit and match the new renters. And then that would give us the good data that we can report moving forward at what different income categories.
Can I ask one more question? When you grandfather, and when other cities have grandfathered pool houses, existing pool houses aren't registered as ADUs. How do they go about that? Do the people individually have to go forward, or do you again send out a survey to the whole town and say, do you have a pool house? And can we do it that way as opposed to putting the onus on private owners to volunteer?
Yeah, so I mean, we can do a lot of different forms of outreach to try to educate people with this new code change that, yes, you can now rent out your pool house where previously you could not, right? So that's a good one. But the grandfathering typically does still involve a building permit because they need to make sure it's safe to occupy as a living unit. And when it was built, you need to make sure you have the egress requirements, the fire requirements, and everything else. So it typically involves a building permit. And then if it didn't include the elements to be considered a house, like it didn't have a kitchen or a bathroom, sleeping facilities, and when they get the building permit, they add those, now that we can consider a net new unit. So let's just say, it was kind of a cabana and it didn't have a kitchen. They add the kitchen. Now I have a housing unit. I didn't before. If it was a guest house, though, that had all those elements and they're now agreeing they're going to rent it, it's not a net new unit. It was always a unit. We just didn't say it was legal to rent. And so HCD is not going to allow us to do that kind of grandfathering, but there could be some units where they can do some improvements and it would then count.
Okay, so I want to take public comment now. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to public comment. And I think, Anthony, do you?
We
Do you
have
ha-
speaker cards in the back. You're welcome to fill those out and then we can do kind of an order. I've only received one, but if you'd
Well,
like to
it's
make-
only necessary if there's a lot of public comment. If there's a relatively, can I just see a show of hands of how many people wish to make comments?
So I'm
Okay,
looking
so
at
we have about 5 people in the room and there's probably some people online. I think we can do it without the cards. So who would like to go? Would you like to go first, please? And if you please, when you give the public comment, you'd state your name and your address. That would be very helpful to us. I think actually 3 minutes is okay if we only have 5 people. It's not a problem.
Thank you
Sure.
for the opportunity to address this council. My name is Tom Georgie, and I am speaking to the interests of over 45 residents in the Oakwood neighborhood in Redwood City generally, and the property of Stephanie Sargent at 425 East Oakwood Boulevard specifically. Thank you for your earlier comments about the overlay zoning plan. It's a relief to hear it won't be included initially, but it doesn't mean it goes away. Mrs. Sargent's property is next door to 23 Oakwood Boulevard. They share a good neighbor fence the entire length of her property. And jamming scores of townhouses up against her fence would be devastating to the peace and the privacy that they've known for 60 plus years. And I know that we've averted that now, but going forward, our hope is that the housing element, as the discussion continues, and the state has commented that there's been a strategic change of direction from the council. And we hear that you guys have a lot of good ideas. You're certainly listening to the 300 public comments. But hopefully we can be proactive in these next 90 days. But upon a rejected housing element, if the town decides to pursue overlay zoning because their hands are tied, that would be ignoring all these voices. And it would be short-sighted if this is done for the expediency of low-hanging fruit to reach the state mandate. There are so many good ideas, and there is such a unique situation here in Atherton that, and in my comments with Mr. Widmer last week or 2 weeks ago, said the state doesn't care about Atherton's uniqueness. I think they should, and I think that should inform it. There's a significant group of Oakwood neighborhood residents who are like-minded with us. Should the overlay zoning continue to be discussed in later process, we'll continue to speak against it and do whatever we can to stop or limit the scope of any development at 23 Oakwood beyond what's legally allowed currently. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, who is next? Please.
Hi, Rod Shepherd. I live at 398 Walsh Road. Thank you very much for listening to us. It's really sort of a breath of fresh air. We've all been attentive to council meetings all over the place, and I'd say you guys have actually come to the table and listened to your residents as well as anybody lately. So depending on what your final decision is, we're very appreciative of that. I had 3 comments, I think. One is Atherton and its uniqueness. A lot of planning groups have a difficulty figuring out how to work in Atherton into the models that they're used to in other cities. And so when we're talking about ADUs, it's oftentimes a complete different model than you might see in Redwood City, for instance. And by that, I mean, folks like us have extra units, and we always bring people in, and invariably I don't charge. And so how does that factor in a rental situation? And certainly I don't want to have a third party purveyor telling me that I have to rent it to this person and may have an issue getting them out later on. So I think those kinds of things need to be thought out. So that's one. 2 is unintended consequences. This process is, for some of us, seems a little condensed, and we haven't really had the chance to think about unintended consequences. And one of the ones that I came across this week was based on AB8. If you don't have multifamily or high density, I'll call it, zoning in your zoning, you can't basically get sued. If you have multifamily overlays, for instance, or high density, then a project sponsor has something to point to in your zoning and in your general plan to actually litigate. So right now, we're in a pretty safe spot, I think, and Mona could probably address it a little more specifically. So I would encourage that you have your outside representatives take a look at it. If I can have some more time at the end, I'd appreciate it. I have just a couple more brief comments. So thank you.
Okay, right. When the bell
Yeah.
rings, does that mean?
So
It
you
means
had 2
1
more
minute
minutes.
left.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
All right, let him have his
another
time.
minute. Yeah,
If I have another,
keep talking.
I was checking out.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Take
Go
another
ahead.
minute, Rod.
All right, so most important with respect to this multi-family or the high density overlay is you got to get all the sites from being identified in the housing element. If you identify sites that can be used for high density in your zoning, that's where all the litigation's taken place lately, even though you haven't changed your general plan or haven't changed your zoning ordinances. So make sure it all comes out of the housing element before it gets submitted to the state. So that's a general comment on AB8. And then I had a couple of specific comments just on the housing element. It says that we have sufficient infrastructure for the contemplated growth. I think that needs to be documented.
or proven, and maybe some studies need to be provided. It also makes some assumptions such as the effect of rezoning is going to generate more affordability by having, more units per acre. That sounds fine, but what happens is the developer pays more for that money, and it becomes more, or for that parcel, and it becomes more difficult to make it affordable. And then I think you've answered the question on how ghost ADUs, these units that are out there that you don't know about are handled, and ones that haven't been in the market. And so I'm looking forward to working with you on that. And then finally, I think it's important to know that there is, as you have heard, ad hoc committees being formed out there. The people of the town of Atherton really want to participate in this process. We've committed to working with our neighbors and our friends and coming up with solutions, not just objections to what you guys are doing right now. So thank you, and really appreciate where we are right now.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Perry Olson. I live at 98 Stern Lane. Firstly, I would like to thank the council for the responsiveness and for listening to what the community has had to say so far. I think that's very encouraging. I think the discussion about the assumption about workers, discussions about the assumptions the state is using, I think are very warranted. I don't think that the town of Atherton should accept the assumptions that the state of California makes, regardless of what the law is. A related point, I think, is that there are other communities in the state that have positions that are similar to Atherton's. And I think it's incumbent upon us to reach out to those communities and identify common interests and develop a common voice. I think that's very important. We're not in this alone. And I don't think the state should be allowed to make assumptions about communities all across the state. And I think we should push back on that dramatically. And then the final thing I'd say is, I know there are inputs from housing advocates. I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is. But I think the inputs that we should listen to are from the residents of Atherton. So thank you very much. Again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you all so very much for your responses to our emails. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your neighborhood visits.
Suzanne, tell us who you are.
I'm Suzanne Couch, an Atherton resident at 63 Victoria Drive, lived there since 2012. And I'm representing the majority of the neighbors in Victoria Manor, the homeowners, the 29 homes on Victoria Drive, Douglas Way, and Leon Way. And to be as efficient as possible and not waste the council's time, we've worked with our neighborhood to collect and summarize our main concerns into a single document that's been signed by 26 of the neighbors and or had email agreement via 12. And I have copies of those for each of you and a verified one for you. Well, we certainly have enormous empathy for the City Council and the Planning Commission, who we know are working hard to try to meet the state requirements. Very challenging logistically and emotionally. Many disparate and passionate voices you're dealing with a long iterative process. We believe that the best outcomes for Atherton will be to meet the state's requirements without overburdening any specific neighborhood and by trying to minimize the impacts in those neighborhoods affected. As the current proposal stands, 8 Victoria Manor properties that are adjacent to Menlo School and Menlo College could be converted to high-density housing. With the proposed removal of the conditional use permit process, this could be done with much less oversight by the City Council and fewer opportunities for public comment. Also, the proposal changes current building restrictions to allow for much taller structures with less setback distance, creating structures that would dwarf the existing residential homes. We believe these changes to the public facilities and schools PFS zone are unnecessary for meeting the state's requirements and could overburden our neighborhood and other members of Menlo School, Menlo College, Sacred Heart School, those on adjacent streets, as well as properties and neighborhoods adjacent to Atherton's public schools. Specifically, we'd like to see the proposed PFS zone changes in the draft proposal from June 9th, 2022 removed, meaning all 4 bullet points on page 82, not just the 3 that the city manager mentioned. This would retain the conditional use permit process, ensuring full city council oversight and public comment, and retain the current height and setback limits without a meaningful reduction to the number of units that could be provided. There's no reason to give up the CUP and many good reasons to keep it. Importantly, if the schools have a legitimate need for taller, high-density housing on campus, such as O'Brien parking lot on Menlo College, we recommend that the city create a new zone for this high-density housing. It should be limited to on-campus locations that are not near adjacent neighborhoods, and this new zoning would be preferable to trying to shoehorn that into the existing PFS zone that could sprawl into our neighborhoods. So thank you all so very much. And we strongly request that you remove those proposed PFS zone changes and address the traffic routing. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Council. My name is Mason Brucci. I've been at 39 Lloyden Drive for 42 years next year. A fabulous 42 years, and I'd like to continue a little more. First of all, I'd like to thank Carrie Olson for making a statement that Bob made on the 2,700 residents, non-residents of this town. They're going to be considered residents. That to me seems idiotic. I think there should be a certified public audit of those numbers so that we don't have any BS as to what these numbers are. I just can't believe it that we can believe numbers like that. I just can't believe a gardener that spends 1 hour in town is considered as a part-time resident. I don't know how they come up with these numbers, but I think we need third-party verification on these numbers. Secondly, Rick mentioned a number of these. It's very difficult to have low-income housing in this town. You said an acre goes for 8 million. I think it goes for a little more than that, but if it does, it doesn't make a lot of difference. It's a hell of a lot of money, a lot of 7 figures here, or maybe 8. So the issue I have is this: isn't Anna Eshu a member?
No.
She's not. She does not live.
She
on-
used to live on Isabella. She now lives in Menlo Park.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, but she's still our Congress.
Yes,
She is our
absolutely.
congresswoman.
Congressman. She's to represent the residents of Atherton.
She does.
Yes.
Okay, and one thing it seems like to me, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Redevelopment has a lot of money. And I don't know when you've been through talking about it's the first time I've come to this meeting, but when you're talking about low-income housing, the government's got trillions. I don't know why we don't use our connections, because you know where she used to live and where she lives now. We can talk to her can we get some Department of Housing money to somehow intertwine with Rick's talking about low-income housing. I just think a lot of people get government money. I don't see why we can't get it either. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mason.
Hi, I'm Andy Jeffrey. I live at 68 Douglas Way in Victoria Manor. And I just wanted to follow on to Suzanne's great comments on how this could affect Victoria Manor and similar neighborhoods in a very ugly way. First, I want to thank you guys all. Many of you responded to our texts or emails, and we really appreciate that. Unintended consequences. Someone mentioned that before about unintended consequences, and your point before about misreading of what's currently in the plan is a little concerning, because there's an issue where if adjacent properties got acquired by the schools, their addresses could be potentially become the same as the school's addresses, and therefore considered on an arterial roadway and could be high density. So those 8 properties on the cul-de-sacs could very much be high density housing. Same on Michael's Way, Howard Way, Brittany Meadows, Isabella, Alejandro. So I think we need to look very carefully to see if the current zoning could change addresses and if that could have the very unintended consequences of high density housing. Lastly, the Victoria Manor, there are several people from Victoria Manor, if you wouldn't mind standing. We had probably 4 or 5 more that had to leave. They have little kids. But there's a bunch of people and there are some people on Zoom all advocating you not do this. So we'd encourage you not to have bullet point 4 included. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anybody online who wishes to give public comment? Okay. There it is. Joseph Donahue. Joe, would you like to speak?
Yeah, hi, my name is Joe Donahue. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there. I just wanted to echo a lot of the sentiments of a lot of people who've spoken tonight, that we all really love this town and don't want it to change. I don't see any reason to change things in fear of what the state wants to do. I like the idea of really doing this in a thoughtful way and taking our time. There's no rush to make rash decisions. The state is, the worst they can do is make us change something that we don't want to change and try to do that down the road. So I support the government and the town people that have been helping us, but I think there's no rush to make any changes, and I would submit the plan that way to the state.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Is there anybody else that wishes to give public comment? Okay, I don't see any other public comment, so I'm going to bring it back to the council. Now, I think people should just confirm to staff the direction that we want to give for how the housing element will change. It seems to me that there's a consensus to agree to the points that you suggested in your introduction, George.
Yes, I can read those again if you like.
Sure.
The first was remove the proposal for multifamily overlays entirely from the housing element. The second was remove the first 3 bullets from the recommendations regarding proposed changes to the PFS zone, effectively retaining the requirement for CUPs and making no changes to height or setbacks. But the council can articulate based on further public comment if you wish to remove that 4th bullet point, which the 4th bullet point is sort of status quo. If the school wants to purchase property and consider it for a zone change, the town would have to consider that if they submit an application.
Because that's currently the law.
Current law, yes.
I would not, go ahead.
And then remove the comment regarding schools specifically developing housing on campus to be rented to the general public. And then remove the inclusionary ordinance provision, as it would no longer be necessary without the overlay zone. For that 4th bullet, you could remove the first few words in it that talks about encouraging multifamily housing, if you wanted to make it more consistent with exactly what the law is. It's just if they submit an application, we consider it. But the way it reads in the housing element, it's in an effort to promote multifamily housing, which is indeed the goal of the housing element, but it's pleasure of the council.
Understand the nuance there.
Okay. Okay. So comments from members of the council.
Well,
Go ahead.
shall I go? I'm in support of those bullet points and what you've just articulated. I think those are the ones that if we pull out the townhome overlays and the things about the school, then, you know, we're really kind of just dealing with ADUs and the SB 9 lot splits. And what are we going to do about the 4 units up on Bear Gulch Lane? I guess that has to go also, right?
What, say it again?
The 4 units up on Bear Gulch Lane.
No, that
Yeah.
doesn't have to go.
That would stay? Okay, because that would be individual units? It's not an overlay. Okay, good, because I think that makes a lot of sense.
Bill?
What do you think?
Yeah, so I pretty much stated my position at the beginning. I still believe the same thing. With regards to bullet point 4, where it says.
Can you read it?
Wait,
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
on
need
page 82
of what, the staff
Yeah.
report or what? Of the housing element?
Housing
Yeah,
element.
to
Okay, let me
facilitate
get
the
it over here.
development of multifamily housing on single-family zone property adjacent to the school. So, I think that some wordsmithing of that to say, this implies that if somebody if the school were to acquire the property, we would encourage them to develop multifamily housing.
It says to
And,
facilitate.
Well, yeah, and facilitate it. So, I think that that's what the complaint is from the Victoria Manor people. I don't, like I said earlier, if the school were to buy property and they wanted to put faculty members in the house that's there and build an ADU or subdivide the lot, of course, just like any other resident, they can do that. But I don't think that we should be saying, well, why don't you do more multifamily housing? We shouldn't be
agree.
encouraging it. And I think that that's what the issue is with
That's
the
why
people
I
from
don't see
Victoria
that.
Manor. They're seeing that the town is implying that we are actually going to outright go and encourage this, that could in fact have a major impact on the traffic and the culture of their community. And I think that
Take it out.
that's not what we were planning on doing. I don't believe.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
so I think a wordsmith of bullet four can remain, but I think a wordsmith of a bullet four needs to occur. I encourage the rest of them to come out, just like we said earlier, get rid of the overlays. And I think that, the outreach now has been very, very good. Obviously, with more people coming back into town in the September timeframe, doing additional is what we need to do. As I mentioned during the discussion, I do believe that we got an allocation as opposed to any detail on the number of people, and we probably in the short period of time we have are not going to be able to address that, although we can debate it in a word or two. And I think that we need to reach out to the major university in our area, as well as the college, as well as HIP housing and others, to help us get that. I thought the idea about getting housing money from the federal government, if we can. I know we're not very successful in getting money because people look at Atherton and say, you guys don't need it, but we're always trying to get it. I'm in favor of going forward, and we'll see what the state has to say. Hopefully the Housing Coalition and our numbers that exceed the 348, hopefully those things will push it to having a good result. And if we could have a report that would say something similar to what Portola Valley sent in, that said, it's been essentially, we've worked with that housing coalition. I think that would add value, which I know that you're trying to do. So I appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
I'd like to agree with all the changes that George outlined, but I would also further like to ask the mayor if he would consider appointing a committee between now and our next September outreach to the public to actually have a subcommittee that would speak with some of these groups, research some of the grant monies, and look at some of the finer details here that we are going to have to address regardless. I mean, they're not going to go away. So.
Yeah, I think we have time to do that. I think that we have a benefit, which is that we have a week before we need to give final approval. So we have the ability to see a turnaround of this draft, reflecting the comments that are being provided tonight. And if it would be helpful to have a subcommittee to work with you on the language, I could do that now. Yes.
I think staff's got that under control with the comments. I think what Councilmember Hawkins Manuelian is suggesting is a subcommittee of the council to work with staff, who would in turn also work with that resident ad hoc committee that was being discussed about housing options and solutions. That's a more long-term
Yeah,
thing.
no, I think that's right. I understand
But
that.
one caveat to that is, and the city attorney can probably comment better than I, an ad hoc committee of the city council that meets just as an ad hoc committee of the city council with staff is not a public engagement meeting. It's not a public agenda. It's not a public process. But the minute you start to engage with the public, then it becomes a public committee that has to have notices, agendas, postings, and that sort of engagement. Mona, what do you have?
That's
any
exactly
opinion?
right. It converts an otherwise ad hoc advisory committee into a standing committee,
Right.
for which you need an agenda, advance notice, and compliance with the Brown Act.
So Mona, may I ask, how can we have this resident involvement that I know that there are a number of residents who would like to kind of be a part of a group that would meet with town staff or town council members to try to find solutions and to work with us over the next few months, maybe even in the public outreach phase, but really in trying to find some solutions. I'm just kind of saying what I heard when I met with a resident group.
The standing committee is the way to do that. It just means that you need to have public agendas and public can be invited and things like that. It's perfectly
It's fine.
fine.
I don't think it's something we have to do tonight.
Right.
That's a longer term thing that will go on after we approve this on the 27th.
Okay.
Right now, the real urgency is to get the housing element right. So, because we're going to publish it on the 27th and send it to the state. And we do have the benefit of seeing the turnaround draft. And I think staff can handle that. Let me give a couple comments. So I think that right now, there's a number of places in the draft where it says things like bullet point 4, which is to facilitate development of multifamily housing. My guess is that really what underlies that is to facilitate the development of affordable housing. And I mean, I think multifamily becomes sort of a term that the state thinks if you have more density, you're going to have more affordability. The problem is that in Atherton, if you have more density, you don't necessarily have more affordability. At least you certainly don't if you have to buy land. So if you have more density on a school, then yes, you may be able to have more affordability than if you don't. But I would rather have the emphasis be to facilitate affordable housing than to focus on multifamily housing. And I think that now that we've removed the entire overlay zoning from the draft, it makes more sense to focus on the affordability issue. And frankly, a big push with the whole ADU focus in the future, and I think this is going to involve the residents committee and no doubt a standing committee, is going to be to create a program that can substantiate that, and we can use it to qualify the numbers that we're presenting to the state. Because if in fact we get letters from residents that say they're interested in this, then that's going to help us with the state. It has to help us with the state. With respect to the schools, again, I actually think it's more important to focus on the affordability issue. And I think that's going to be much more comfortable to the neighborhoods around the schools than if we try to emphasize the multifamily aspect, because that raises red flags. So I think as you go through the draft, if you can be sensitive to that, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Other comments?
I have a question. I know we're not allowed, and it's really to Lisa. Can someone, if you have an ADU and you rent it to your parents or your kids for $10, would that count?
If their income is an affordable range.
Yes, so
Yeah.
if you have a
So,
senior
for example,
citizen
my
parent-
daughter is an elementary school kindergarten teacher. Her income would qualify. And if I had an ADU and I rented it to her at an affordable rent, yes.
It's based on.
But it can be whatever you set it for. So if it's like a senior citizen, you can say $1. That
The,
would
the
count.
key is the individual's income
Income
needs
is
to
not what the
qualify
rent
and the
is.
rent needs to be at that level. Yes, or below.
Got it.
I
I
think-
know some residents don't charge anything for their units and are very generous. Yeah.
And it still
And
count.
we need a program that can substantiate this, because my mom can live in my ADU and be on Social Security, and that be her only income. That's 100% very low income, but it has to be substantiated to be justified. And I think if you really look across the town of Atherton, most ADUs that are rented, I mean, there are plenty of ADUs that are like Rod Shepherd said, that where they host students, others host local service workers. But the most
Musicians.
ADUs are filled by family members, either children or parents. And we just don't substantiate that, but that's part of what the program would do. Okay, I think
I think that's it.
if we're good, we're good.
I don't know, where do we end up on bullet point 4?
Yeah, that just kind
You're-
of wordsmithing it.
We're going to wordsmith the fourth bullet point to focus more on affordability rather than multifamily.
Because I presume that the true fact is that if they want to acquire a property and want to bring it to us because they want to do something other than what is normally required, we would look at it and consider it, because that's the prudent thing to do.
Current law. Yeah.
Well, and
that's
that's the
current law.
current law,
Right. Okay.
but we're not going to.
But that whole thing needs to be wordsmith, because when you look at it now, if you take out the bullet points, there's an introductory clause that says to facilitate development of additional multifamily housing, this is going to happen. So the whole thing needs to be
Right.
reworked.
My only other comment, and I think George alluded to it in his introductory comments, on page 89, where you describe, Lisa, the outreach that we had, and basically you talk about an April 26th meeting, that's woefully inadequate. I mean, there've been many meetings. George had sent an email out in early June that delineates all the meetings where this has been addressed with public agenda, et cetera. And since the last meeting we had in this chamber, council members have met with residents, they've responded to emails, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, I don't know whether it matters to HCD. Maybe they skipped that page because they think it's filler, but there's been a lot more done than and that should be included.
What we're proposing to do also between now and September.
By the way, I have one other suggestion that I'd like you to think about, which is, I can't find exactly where the reference is in here, but there was a page where you referenced what the fees were for different kinds of programs. And one of them was the fees for applying for an ADU, which was like $1,050 or something like that. And one thing we could do is, and if we want to incentivize the ADUs, we could consider waiving that fee. And I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. And you've suggested that for some other things, that would be one that we could do.
Yeah, that was suggested in your very first meeting, actually. And I thought it was pretty good.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I know lots of
Moving
people
on.
don't want to stay for the rest of
Well, I
the
don't know why
program.
not.
We have 3 more
Why
agenda
not?
items.
It'll
if
be
you'd like
really
to
exciting.
stay, you know, 'cause
Really
it's-
exciting.
I think you guys should all have to stay.
The next item is item 20, which is adoption of a resolution to consolidate and call the November 8th, 2022 general municipal election and contract with the Chief of Elections Office for Election Services. George, and Anthony.
He's our city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Looks like we're going to have a short break, but everything you need to know is in the staff report. What you're being asked to do is adopt 2 different resolutions, one calling the election, the other consolidating with the Board of Supervisors for the statewide general election. And then lastly, you're being asked to authorize the city manager to sign an agreement to contract with the San Mateo County Elections Department to facilitate our election for us. And, you know, unless you have any questions, it's all laid out in the staff report and we'll just need motions.
And
and-
is that the money also to
The
approve the
$12,000 was budgeted
$12,000?
in this fiscal year.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's what we should come in at about. We've already got our voter files from the county and we're still around the same registered voter numbers, just under like 5,500 folks.
Okay, I have no questions. Question?
Nope,
Mr.
no
Blair?
questions.
No
Ready to move
Can I have a
forward.
motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Sorry.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, just want to confirm there's no public comment.
Is there public comment?
Stacy, do you would like to make a comment?
I don't see any public comment. Thank you, Mona. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And Diana is abstaining, not present.
Diana's
not
absent right
voting.
now.
Okay, item 21 is the award of professional services agreement for interim consulting planning services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you know, Good City Planning Services, Lisa next to us, who's doing the yeoman's job on the housing element, has advised that they're going to be transitioning away from providing services to the town during fiscal year 22-23. The transition will be more immediate for current planning services, the counter services, and will require interim services from another firm to close that gap. She's going to continue to work in the short term on the housing element and will get us at least through the January submittal and possibly beyond, seeing what we can work out. Staff conducted an informal request for proposal, received 3 responses. Staff recommends that the council award a professional services agreement for interim services to M Group. M Group has extensive experience throughout the Bay Area and in several communities in San Mateo and Santa Clara County. Some of you on the Stanford multi-agency Stanford subcommittee is familiar with Jeff Bradley, who works with Supervisor Joe Simidian. He is the owner, one of the owners of M Group. Staff recommends that professional services agreement be interim for like 12 to 18 months only. And the reason for this is planners are very, very, very busy. And I think if we put a formal, full-fledged RFP on the street, our responses would be quite expensive. And we would get limited responses. So Jeff Bradley agreed to do the services for 12 to 18 months, in which time we would put together a formal RFP toward the end of this fiscal year, 22-23, put that on the street and see what we would get. I'm assuming M Group would respond to that as well. But during that time, we'd also be able to develop a relationship with them and see how they do here in Atherton. We did put, I did put, like I said, 3 out on the street. I got 3 responses. One from Urban Planning Partners who declined to respond because they are just far too busy. One from RGS Services, which also works with the town and provides human resources assistance to the town, and then M Group, and staff's recommending M Group.
Great.
Lisa,
Questions?
would there be a transition?
Yes, there'd be a transition and overlap probably through the month of August. And of course, she'd still be around
Yeah.
during the housing element.
Thank you. Okay. Oh my gosh. I don't want you to go.
And then at the end of 18 months, you can change your mind and come back on.
Yeah.
Respond to the RFP, yes, at higher rates.
How's Neil?
Okay,
Any questions?
I have
Any
no
other
questions. I'm ready to make the motion.
please.
I'd like to move that we agree with the awarding of the professional services agreement for interim consulting services to M Group and allow the city manager and the city attorney to prepare and approve an agreement on behalf of the town.
I'll second.
And confirming that there's no public comment again.
There's no, she's got no public
There's no
comment.
public comment.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimously approved. We're moving on to item 22,
Oh, wow.
which is to approve the creation of the management analyst and reception clerk positions and establish salary ranges for those positions.
Analyst 1 and 2, right?
And let's 1/2, yes. As the council is aware, the town has a job classification plan that consists of all job classifications within associated characteristics, examples of duties, et cetera. When a new classification is created or when a position's duties change significantly, a job analysis is done to reclassify that position or to create that position. And the city manager is authorized to add or delete classifications, reclassify and assign new classes to specific salary ranges. But CalPERS requires that the city council actually approve the creation of those positions before I can recruit for them. As the town's service levels and demands shift, we've made adjustments in departmental responsibilities to ensure that the organization is able to focus on the council's goals and the needs of the community. After careful review, I'm recommending 2 changes. One is the front desk office specialist position, reclassify that to a receptionist / postal clerk to really focus in on what that position does. In this new building, that's the primary point of contact when all residents come in. We used to have 2 buildings, now we have 1, so that's all that person strictly does now. And then 2, to create some depth within the city manager's office. Right now, we've got Anthony and that front desk person, and that's it within the city manager's office. I think he's got an intern over there that assists him every now and then. But in all the other vast amount of programs that administration has taken on, it's him and I and Francesca that do that work. And Francesca is stuck at the front desk. So it ends up being just the 2 of us. And we are responsible for the Environmental Programs Committee. Stacy Miles is the current chair. We are responsible for refuse management services. We're responsible for HR, for city clerk, for a number of other functions for the town, as well as IT and website development. So the management analyst position would allow us to have a little more depth, and we need a body to help do that work. So that's the 2 positions that I'm recommending that we consider creating. The front desk position would be reclassified downward. Francesca would remain in that position. And then we would recruit for a management analyst 1/2. That concludes the staff report.
Question?
I have a question. So
Yeah.
just explain once again, because it's that we're creating management analyst 1/2.
No, those are 2 different positions.
Oh, 1 and 2. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the management analyst 1 would be the front desk postal clerk.
No,
No,
the front desk is currently an office specialist. That
That's
would
the
be
receptionist clerk.
reclassified to the reception / clerk.
okay.
And then we would recruit for an analyst 1/2. Why there's a 1/2 is it provides an opportunity for that position to have some growth. So if we end up with an individual in that position that has a bachelor's degree and is fresh out of college and doesn't have a whole lot of experience, we could bring him in on the lower end of a management analyst 1
Got it.
salary range. But if we find somebody that's really qualified, has a lot of experience, we could steal him from another agency. Maybe we need to bring him in as a management analyst 2.
Okay.
Emphasis on this.
And
Another agency.
What specifically will the management analyst do?
So you have the attached job classification there. The best characteristic for what that position would do is the last bullet point on page 10, which says perform other duties as assigned. That is the best thing we can put in a job application here in any organization. In all my years of HR, that's been the one that everybody loves. They do everything above that, or have the potential to do everything above that bullet point, but it's really anything that we need done that we can use that individual to get accomplished.
If I could also elaborate just a bit.
Sure.
We have our sustainability program, and we have right now our consultant sustainability coordinator, Douglas Kim, who has, amongst a lot of other things, helped us with dealing how we're going to do reporting work with SB 1383. He's helped create marketing, content, outreach material. He's also participated in a number of community and regional programs and services, but that contract at some point will be transitioning away. This management analyst person would then assume a lot of those reporting functions and duties to kind of support what we're doing as we're looking to expand some of those services. We've already added a few small programs, and to really enhance what we're going to do in that area, we need to add somebody who can focus, if not exclusively on it, but they can put a good chunk of their time around that. And there's requirements for education and outreach related to food service providers and related to compost and a whole host of other things.
And then some of the other bullet points in there to further elaborate is that the ones that I added after Anthony created it in general is helping the town with its emergency management program and ADAPT. We currently have Sergeant Fong over in the police department who does the bulk of that, but he's got a lot of other responsibilities as well. This would provide some administrative support for ADAPT, which I believe they are currently lacking, and some leadership as well. Also managing the town's website and social media presence. We've got a lot of information that goes up on the town's website. Between Anthony and I and Francesca, we are hard pressed to try and keep up with all of that. You see a lot of the other bullet points there, administering contracts and agreements. They're also going to be doing some, or assisting us with some of the work that R3 currently does with green waste.
So will Kim's position go away? And
Yes.
this person will be then responsible for EPC, is that correct?
They may be responsible for providing support for the EPC, but they may not be the exact staff liaison until they've got up to speed.
Okay,
What level of education are you expecting? Are you expecting BA, MBA, what
Minimum bachelor's degree.
minimum bachelor's?
Yeah, so we need to change the
Yeah, we'll work on that.
document.
Well,
So what
Google's not
happened to-
hiring anymore, so there's going to be people.
Yeah.
So
Our
what
hope is
happened
we can
with-
steal
with
somebody
Anthony,
experienced.
you know, they have that saying, work smarter, not harder. What's the deal with Anthony?
I haven't learned it.
We just need to clone you is all.
Anthony has a bucket, not a plate of things that
Oh,
he's responsible.
I'm in favor of this.
Me too.
Yeah, it's definitely needed.
I'd like to move that we approve the change of the addition of the job classifications as stated in the staff report. And let the city manager move forward with the changes on the bachelor's degree requirement as opposed to just say or equivalent.
I'll second that.
okay, let me see if there's any public comment on this. No?
Hire
No
this
public
person.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay, hey, look at that, 8:30.
Okay,
Beat the 8:30 number you and I talked about.
what do you
You
know?
didn't think it was possible.
I didn't. I think that's
No,
because
I
of how we handled the housing element. that
well, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you
we
guys
got
did
less
a good
comments than
job.
we otherwise would
Maybe
have.
we need to stop our recording. I'll adjourn.
Any last public comments?
Well, Greg Crump's not here.
Fine.